Welcome to Ocean County Baptist Church. Let's all stand. We're going to sing Rock of Ages, Cleft for Me. Let's sing it out on that first verse. Rock of Ages, cleft for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood inside which flowed be of sin the double cure. Save from wrath and make me pure. Could my tears forever flow? Could my zeal no longer know? These for sin could not atone. And thou alone in my hand no price I bring. Simply to the cross I cling while I draw this fleeting breath. When my eyes shall close in death, when I rise to worlds unknown and hold thee on thy throne, Rock of Ages, cleft for me, hide thyself in thee. Great singing, let's pray. Dear Lord, I just thank you for everything that you've done, Lord. I thank you for being that Rock of Ages for me and for anyone that will trust in you and abide in you, Lord. I just, give us a good week this week. Give us a good service. Bless the speaking, Lord. Just help me to say the words that you have for me in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. We are going to be in Daniel chapter number 1 this evening. Daniel chapter number 1. I want to thank Pastor for giving me the opportunity to speak. He's away, so pray for him, Mrs. Weigel. They'll get spiritual nourishment that they need and rest that they need so that he can come back refreshed. And for the time being, you get the substitutes in. So I'm always grateful, though, for an opportunity to speak. I don't take it lightly. I appreciate it. I'm thankful that Pastor would let me take this opportunity. And for the next few Wednesdays from Pastor away, I'm going to be speaking in the book of Daniel, so this is the first one in that. I always enjoy the book of Daniel. To me, it's a good story. It's a great learning opportunity for somebody who, you know, if there's anybody that had the list of excuses, really, or list of reasons to just kind of take and look through why I can't serve God, or why I can't follow after God, or why I can't do what I need to do, it would be Daniel. He had a pretty rough circumstance. We're going to talk about it today as we introduce the chapter in the book. But he chose to continue to move on from that. He chose to overcome those circumstances, those obstacles, those things that were in his path, and he chose to follow after God, made those decisions on his own in spite of opposition, in spite of circumstance, in spite of everyone around him, doing exactly the opposite. Here's Daniel, at the time a teenager, choosing to serve and follow after God. So today's lesson is going to be Daniel's purpose. And so, reading in chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasures of the house of his God." Daniel is living in Judah. And you might be like, man, he's living in God's chosen land, God's chosen area, God's chosen people are living in the land God has for him. That must have been like. But it wasn't a time where there was a lot of rejoicing in those things. See, the children of Israel for years had done whatever they wanted to do. They had done evil, as the Bible says, in the sight of the Lord, under Manasseh and under his son Ammon. And then Josiah comes along and he does what's right in God's eyes, and the people follow after him. But at that point, even then, it was too late. They had already rejected God so many times. But God said, just because Josiah had followed after me, because Josiah's heart was perfect before the Lord, he would not see the destruction. But then Josiah dies, and Jehoiakim becomes the king, and immediately takes Israel back into the idolatry that they had left under Josiah's reign. And at this point, God had raised up Babylon, the sworn enemies of God, a polytheistic society. That means they worshipped an abundance of gods. They had all these false idols, all these false gods, these gods made of wood, these gods made of stone that they worshipped. And then they come and they besiege the city of Jerusalem, the city that had been selected as the capital. It had been the point of pride for the nation of Israel. It had been something they looked at was their kingdom in Jerusalem, where the palace was and where God's house was in the temple. And now it's under siege. Now it's under fire. And when Nebuchadnezzar sieged it, he took the vessels that were to be used in the worship of God and brought them with him to Babylon. The very symbols of the power of God, the very symbols of the presence of God, are now being brought for idol worship in Babylon. So this isn't a time where people are looking at it saying, oh yes, this is when we want to live in the nation of Israel. This is a time as this Bible says earlier, like Ichabod, where the glory of the Lord had departed from the nation of Israel. This is one of those times where they had rejected God so many times. And God is merciful, but each time we reject God, it's like we're testing his mercy that much more. And they had tested it to the point where now they were going to pay the penalty for it. And so first off, we see the captivity. We read that in the first 3 verses. And the first point there is the captivity. The first sub-point under that is the people. And we just kind of talked about it. The people of the Babylonians. The people of the city of Babylon. Babylon, for those of you that don't know, I love geography, I love history. Babylon is a city that is located in modern-day country of Iraq. It's located along the Euphrates River. It was the site of probably one of the most powerful kingdoms in the ancient world, if not the most powerful. They were extremely powerful. One of the things that gave them such an advantage was the strategic location of the city in which they lived. They lived in literally the city rested right on the Euphrates River. The river ran through the city, which provided a natural defense. Because if you're on a river, there's only a certain amount of ways you can attack. And not to mention, a river is a source of fresh water, which means one of the ways that they attacked cities back in that day was to remove the water supply. Most people had water supply throughout the city. Most of them didn't have rivers running right through it. They had a natural water source that they lived with in spite of sieges, in spite of that. And they had the river gated so that you couldn't take a boat and sail the river. It was their walls were super thick. You could almost have chariot races on them. They were that thick. So high you couldn't attack them. The river running through it gave them a water support source. It was almost impossible to attack this city. But it also gave them a lot of pride. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about as we go through this next couple chapters is Nebuchadnezzar's pride and the things he dealt with. And so they siege the city of Jerusalem. They take them captive and they bring them back. And there's 2 things I want you to notice about the people. This isn't on the slides, but two things real quick. One is they don't know who God is. And that's a sad thing. That they went to the city of Jerusalem. They conquered the nation of Israel. They had sat there sieging the city for 2 years and still didn't know who God was. Other countries had attempted to attack Israel before, had attempted to attack Judah. I think of the nation of Assyria about 150 years before, had attacked the nation of Judah under the reign of Hezekiah. And that nation very quickly found out the power of the God of the nation of Israel when 185,000 troops were slain one night by an angel of the Lord. The king sent packing without his army, only to get home and have his own children execute him so they could take the throne. See, they figured out who God was. Yeah, they attacked, but they figured out who God was. Babylon attacks Israel. They attack this nation of Judah, and they siege the city, and they're making a mockery out of God. Second thing I notice is they don't reverence him either. What do? They carry, the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, that's Nebuchadnezzar, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. Notice the little g in those verses. Those are false gods. Gods that aren't real, gods that aren't to be worshipped, gods that aren't to be reverenced. But the king of Israel was given into the king of the Babylonians' hands. God basically said, I have to punish you. I'm going to use Babylon to do it. So I'm going to give you into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar. And now he's going to take those vessels, which I sanctify, which I set apart to be used in the worship of me. And he's now going to take them and put them in the house of his false gods. See, they didn't know who God was. They didn't reverence God. Sad time in the book there. Sad time in the nation of Israel. Next thing I see is the prerequisites, though. The king spake unto Ashpenaz, verse 3, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, in whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Verse 3, you see it there. Princes of the king's palace, no blemish, well favored. It means I want the best of the best. He didn't just go into Israel and take anybody. He had a very specific set of requirements for Ashpenaz. Ashpenaz was put in charge of getting these captives together. See, this was not the first time they had done this. Babylon, as I said, I love history. I teach it in the high school here. Babylon was famous for doing this. They would not, Assyria, when they came in and conquered you, they took your people and they moved them all over the world and then brought new people to inhabit your land. The idea was to make sure you never overthrew them. Any kind of national pride, you think about it, we live in a great country. I'm proud to be an American. I'm proud that I'm in our country where we can come here, we can worship freely, we can celebrate and remember a lot of times the sacrifice. We had Memorial Day a couple weeks ago, remembering the sacrifice of the millions that have given their lives for our nation. And we can appreciate that and remember that and be appreciative of the fact that we live in a country where we get to do all of these things. And there's no fear of the government coming knocking on our door. There's no fear of us not being able to do this. We are allowed to worship God in the way that we choose to. And I'm thankful I get to go to a church where we worship God according to the Bible, because there's a lot of churches out there that do worship God in the way that they want to. And it's not a very biblical way. But Babylon was different. See, they didn't want to take everyone and move them around. No, they wanted to create a hard-working, cohesive unit. But what they did do was they looked. They had their eye out. Whenever they conquered a nation, whenever they conquered a territory, they had their eye out for the best young people they could find. Because where most kingdoms failed was succession. And I'll explain this. Most empires were good as long as the leaders were good. They were run by a strong king, a strong ruler, a strong system. And as long as that system was strong, the empire would continue. But in most cases, when that first king or whoever started the empire or established the kingdom died, the empire weakened. Babylon's goal was to have such a strong, sound basis by taking the best young people they could find around the world, that they would never have that problem. And so their goal was very specific. They had prerequisites. They wanted the best of the best for the next purpose, and that was the program. And here we go. I'm going to read verse 4. Most of this was what we read already, but I want to focus on one part of it. Children in whom was no blemish. That means there wasn't anything wrong with them. They were healthy, they were strong, they were smart. But well favored, skillful in all wisdom, cunning in knowledge, understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. Here's the program. They wanted to turn them into citizens of Babylon. That was their goal. And that meant so much more than just teaching them the customs and traditions. It meant the religion, the false gods, the atheistic, polytheistic religion that they had. When I say atheistic, they didn't believe in the true God. When I say polytheistic, they had many different statues and false gods that they worshipped. They worshipped objects of nature, the sun. They worshipped the moon. They worshipped the water. They worshipped the ground. They worshipped birth and life and death. And so many different gods that they worshipped. Much like the land of ancient Egypt, they worshipped many different false gods. And their program was to create a young core of Babylonians, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Why? You might be like, well, why are you giving all this? This is the background. This is the story of how Daniel ends up in Babylon. So this guy Daniel isn't just anybody. We just read it. More than likely comes from royalty, has smarts, has good wits about him, has the ability to stand in the king's palace. It means he has a presence about him, is cunning, is knowledgeable. He's one of the best young people that Judah had to offer. And he gets taken to Babylon. Next, we're going to see the corruption. In verse 5, and the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names. For he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. I many times as a kid, I heard the story of Daniel growing up in church, in Sunday school, in junior church, Wednesday night kids program, whatever's going on. And I didn't really fully understand those 3 verses. And I've heard them many times since then. I've started to grasp the meaning of that. We just talked about it in the first part, though. They are trying to change everything about these young people. The name change meant much more than just changing a name. In America, names mean something, but most times we name people after family or after, maybe a name that we like or a name that we see that we, goes well with the last name that we have. But our first name doesn't carry the same meaning in many ways that it did in the Bible. In the Bible, your name was who you were. It was your identifying mark. You could have, that's why the Bible says a good name is rather be chosen than great riches. Names mattered. And the first thing I want to point out is the meaning of their names. I didn't put them on the slides, but I'm going to read them for you. First one is Daniel. The name Daniel means God is my judge. The name Hananiah, God has favored. Mishael, who is what God is. I'll explain that one in a minute. Who is what God is. And Azariah, Jehovah has helped. Daniel, God is my judge. God is the final authority on everything that I do. His decisions are final. What his word says is what I do. God is my judge. Hananiah, God is favored. That means God is looked down on you with favor. That means God is blessed. God is helped. Mishael, who is what God is. That basically is like the verse in the Old Testament that says, who is like unto our God? It's a rhetorical question. It means there is no one like God. There is no one to compare to our God. There is no one that lines up, that measures up with who God is. And Azariah means Jehovah has helped. It means God is our help. God is our strength. God is the one that gets us through. But nextly, I wanted to focus on the meaning of the new names. Belteshazzar means Bel's prince. That's a false god that they worshipped in Babylon. Shadrach, command of Aku, or the Babylonian god of the moon. Meshach, who is like Shak, or the Babylonian god Venus. And Abednego, the servant of Nebo, the Babylonian god of wisdom. Each one an attempt to corrupt the minds of these people, the minds of God's chosen people. Daniel was taken from where God dwelt in the temple, in the symbol of God's presence, to a nation that did not know who God was, didn't reverence who God was, and wanted to turn them into citizens of Babylon. And the last thing, I know I kind of did it out of order in the verses there, but it was found in verse 5, by giving them meat that was offered to idols, something strictly prohibited in Jewish customs and Jewish laws. So, what happens? What's the results of this? Next, I want to show you the challenge. It's my third point, the challenge. We've seen the corruption. We've seen the captivity of the nation of Israel. We've seen the attempted corruption, or the corruption of the children of Israel by offering them meat, by changing their names. And by the way, I'm sure the Bible does not list any more than the 4 names that we just talked about. Every single one of the young men that were taken had a name change. Every single one. And the goal was to get them to forget about who God was. The question we have to ask ourselves is, times are tough. People would love to see God removed from everything from society. But one thing I appreciate, and one thing I can appreciate is some of the people in the world today that have come out and stood up and said, no, I'm a Christian, I believe in Jesus Christ, and in position to lose a lot for saying it, and come out and say it anyway. You know what? I'm not sitting here judging everyone's heart. Is it possible some of them are doing it for popularity or to get a name? Yeah, probably. But you know what? Christ is being proclaimed. I believe it was Paul that said in the New Testament, there were people that were preaching Christ of contention, people that were preaching Christ to add affliction to me, people that were preaching Christ to basically contend or fight with somebody else. He's like, I'm just thankful Christ is being preached. He goes, I'm not going to argue about all this stuff. You know what? The truth is, we live in a world that's very antagonistic towards the things of God. We live in a world that's very anti-God. It's almost, I try to put it this way, it's almost, we don't live in an atheistic society anymore. It's not enough that you don't believe in God. It's like anti-theistic. It is, you can't just be, I don't believe in any God. You have to be against everything that God is. And it's not enough just to say, not to get involved. If you do not hate God as much as the world does, they'll shun you, they'll disown you, they'll get on you. You don't think that's the case? Why is it that every single children's activity is on Sunday and Wednesday? You don't think they know? They know exactly what they're doing. They do. They know exactly what they're doing. They have 7 days to pick. And they pick the 2 days that most traditionally have been used for worship. It's not an accident. And I can tell you, it's not just them making the decisions. That's a spiritual battle to test parents around the nation. Where do your loyalties lie? Pick. You want the accolades, you want the athletics, you want the fame, you want the fortune? Give up God. That's what they say. You may not say that out loud, but you make the decision one way or the other. The truth is, I was talking about this with somebody a couple weeks ago, but kids know a lot more than we give them credit for. You may not say it, oh yeah, we're picking baseball over church, kids. You don't have to. Make the decision, and they've heard everything they need to know. Because they know what the choice is, even at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I remember when my parents made the choice for us that we couldn't play like township baseball or anything anymore because it was all on Sundays. I knew what the choice was. I was 10. I knew exactly what the decision was. I knew it was church or sports. And honestly, even at 10 years old, because of the values my parents had instilled in me, I knew it wasn't a choice. As much as I loved baseball, as much as I loved playing it, it didn't matter. It paled in comparison to everything else. But you know what? So many times we think, oh, it won't make a difference. It won't matter. Well, then why is it that so many people at 20 years old, when they grew up in church their whole life, are leaving? It's because they're being shown in subtle ways, or in some cases not so subtle ways, this is secondary. If something's a priority to us, nothing gets in the way. Those of you that don't know, there's probably not many that don't. I'm a diehard Yankees fan. I love the New York Yankees. I know we got Mets fans in here, probably some Philly fans in here too, but I'm a diehard Yankees fan. And I love watching baseball, and I love watching the games and doing all that stuff. But I'm trying to think when it was. But if there was a choice, and I'll be dead serious, it wouldn't be a choice. If there was a choice, if somebody said, here's 2 home plate seats for Game 7 of the World Series, and it was on a Sunday, I wouldn't go. I'd record the game and watch it after church. And I'm not bragging about that. That's a lot of that's in large part due to the values that were instilled in me when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. What is the priority? We're going to talk about it right now. In verse 8 it says, "But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself." Next point's the challenge. First off, notice the respect for the officer. Daniel makes no apologies for what he's doing. I'm not going to defile myself. I'm not going to eat what God has commanded me not to eat. I'm not going to drink what God's commanded me not to drink. But he didn't go up and say, the Bible doesn't say, then Daniel demanded of the prince of the eunuchs. It says he requested. If I have a request, I walk up and I say, excuse me, is this possible for you to do this, this, this? Just a question. And the tone says it all. And I believe the word requested there shows the respect he had for the man who was in charge of him. He's not sitting there demanding, saying, my God says, I can't. How dare you? First you want to change our names. Now you want to change our diet. You want us to do all these things. That's not what he did. He said, it says he requested. In verse 9, now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. You know, I have found a lot of times when we fear that doing the right thing is going to cause a problem, it doesn't cause nearly the problem that it normally would. What do I mean by that? Situation comes up and you know, your boss needs you to do something, but say they'll take you out of church and you can't do it, or you feel conviction you shouldn't do it. Many times, when done in the right way, hey, I'm sorry, I can't. I have church. I really can't be working on Sundays. I can't really do this or that. Oh, okay. I didn't realize. Or oh, okay. I'll just switch it. If you need me to work a different shift, if you need me to come in on a Saturday, I'll come in on a Saturday. But I really need my Sunday to be free for church. That happened to me in a lot of situations with the jobs I had to work through high school and through college. Just different things where the hiring process said, okay, you have to be able to work on a Sunday, and I'm like, not working Sundays, but I'll apply because I feel like I need a job. And then when I got interviewed, I really can't do Sundays. Oh, can you do this instead? Can you do Saturday afternoons? I was like, yeah, I'll do a Saturday afternoon. Do I want to do a Saturday afternoon? Well, when I'm in college, no, I got school Monday through Friday. It'd be nice to have an afternoon to focus on schoolwork, but what I'm going to say is, thank you, take the job and do what I need to do to get my college paid for. If we are coming at it with the right spirit and the right attitude, a lot of times God fills in the question marks and answers the questions. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes there's contention. Sometimes there's an argument to be had by the boss or by the person that's making the decisions. But at the end of the day, if our spirit is a godly one, no matter the result, God is glorified, God is honored. Notice a realization of the risk. You're like, Daniel's risk? No, the risk that the prince of the eunuchs made. Look at this verse. In verse 10, it says, the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be looked on before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servants. You can put the last one up to the 10 days, the request for 10 days. So we can covenant to them, so we consented to them in this matter and proved them 10 days. Daniel, once again, coming at it with the right attitude, realized the risk this man was putting out for himself. This man is in a position of authority. The king has appointed the food that they are to eat. It wasn't his decision, it's the king's. So if he changes their diet and they come out looking sick, that man's not going to be in too good of a position. As in, the king was known to just say, okay, he's going to be executed. This man's life is on the line. And he goes to Daniel, he goes, look, I can't do that. If I do that, I'll be dead. He said, I'm going to endanger my head. My head will be taken from me. And then Daniel's response, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days. He's once again not demanding, he's like, please, just 10 days. Give us 10 days. We won't be that bad in 10 days. And if it is worse, if you decide we look worse than they do, then we'll go back to whatever you say. But 10 days. Once again, he's in a challenging situation. In a situation where he needs to prove to him, he's proving God, he's testing God, saying, I'm going to do what you told me to do. Can you, and he gives him 10 days. You know, many times we fail in this area because we're afraid to take the risk. Daniel took a risk. His word was on the line here. How he was viewed by this man in charge of him was on the line. His faith was on the line. And because his faith was on the line, he said, I'm going to take this risk. Give us 10 days. Imagine that kind of faith. And no, he didn't ask for filet mignon and sauteed mushrooms. He asked for pulse and water. Pulse is like mixed vegetables, almost in like a stew kind of consistency, and water. But he was determined. He was going to honor God. We so many times, I heard this in college, a faith that cannot be tested cannot be trusted. When we live our life in faith, tests will come. I could say, oh man, I know all that there is to know about history. I could say that, I know everything from, 4,000 BC to the creation of Adam and Eve, all the way to now. You quiz me on anything you want. Go ahead, quiz me. But until I actually take a test on it, we'll see how much I actually know. Kids always ask, what's the purpose of tests and quizzes in school? Why do we have to have tests? That purpose, it's a test. To see your progress. How much you've learned. In sports, it's like a tough challenge, a tough opponent. Somebody we go up against that maybe is better than us. Why do we have that challenge? It's to test how far we've come, how much better we've gotten as a team or as a group. They run tests on anything. You think about if you get wires, or you get even the chairs you're sitting in, they get tested for a certain amount of weight to see how much it can hold. Be grateful that happens. Imagine if they just stuck the thing together and said, oh yeah, we think it'll hold 200 pounds. I don't know that I'd be sitting in that chair. Everything gets tested. Think about it, your car gets tested. They test the brakes. Be thankful they test it before they sell it to you. Could you imagine? There's no brake line. You go to hit the brake and nothing works. Wouldn't be good. Then why do we think it's a bad thing that our faith get tested and our faith get challenged and we treat it as if we're being attacked, like it's the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to us? No. This is an opportunity for growth. Daniel's sitting here with an opportunity as really a teenager, by himself for the first time, to grow his faith in his God. And fourth point, I changed it a couple times. I couldn't think of a good word for it to line up with the C's, but the success or the victory, or we're going to go with success for this one. First thing I see is the reward for the risk. Verse 15, at the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine which they should drink, and gave them pulse. And as for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom. Skill in all learning. Yeah, I just read that. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of these days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them. And among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. Reward for the risk. They took the risk for 10 days. Melzar took the risk of his head, and it paid off for both of them. You imagine being the guy in charge of those 4 after 3 years? That man, I can imagine he probably got a promotion. I mean, think about it. If the king is watching for the best of the best, and 4 people stand out, and they're all under the leadership of one guy, sure, oh yeah, we're promoting him. He's obviously found something. Because he trusted Daniel, because Daniel respected his authority, but also respected God enough to say, I'm not going to just sit here and do what I want to do. I need to do what God wants me to do. Responsibility and continue. The responsibility given is the next thing. In all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, and so when he questioned of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. These are people that had been established and been doing this for years. The 30 and 40-year-olds that had been in astrology for years. He said Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were better than all of them. We're going to talk next week in Daniel chapter number 2. When a dream comes to Nebuchadnezzar, when he's out of all hope, he has nowhere else to turn. He's going to turn to Daniel and his 3 friends. Because God has given them favor. God has given them wisdom. And they didn't have to compromise anything that they believed in. Because they stayed true to who God was. Because they stayed true to what God had for them. The responsibility was given to them. And lastly is the resounding review. And that's verse 20, and then again in verse 21. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. 4 kings, 2 empires later, and Daniel's still standing strong. Because he trusted his God. In conclusion, when we get to the end of chapter 1, we see the results of obedience to what God has planned. They're better than healthier than anyone else because they followed God's plan for their life. When we choose to follow after God, we will be blessed. It doesn't mean life will be easy, but it does mean that we will have a blessed life. God doesn't promise easiness. He promises blessings. And our world and our microwave society has equated the two together. That ease of life and blessings are the same thing. They are not. Spiritual blessings may accompany physical discomfort. But if we live for God, if we stand up like Daniel did, we will be blessed. The Bible says, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. But in order to have a nation that follows God, it starts with a church that follows God, that then reaches a world to follow God. And that's how you can turn a nation back. I think for too long, I think it's been said a lot the last couple weeks, from the sermons and stuff. It's just that we try and, so many times we think, oh man, what's wrong with the world? We got to change the world. What's wrong with the world is the church. We got to look at ourselves. Even in Matthew, it says, why are you looking at the mote in someone else's eye when you got a beam in your own eye? What do we need to do? We need to get our own life right. We need to get our own sin cleansed. We need to get ourselves in a right position with God. And then reach a world that needs God. The world has been wicked from the time of the beginning. It has. Sodom and Gomorrah, 2,500 years before Christ, were known for all the immorality that we see today. It's not new. How about Babylon? How about Egypt? The wickedness of those empires. Assyria. You want to talk about a wicked city? Nineveh was about the worst of the worst. Now, I'm not comparing wickedness because I believe God sees all sin as sin. But what I'm saying is the sins we're seeing today are not new. They're not an exception. We can go through the world history and we can talk about it. Like I said, you got the Assyrian Empire, you got Babylon. Go to Rome. They were fighting people to the death in arenas and calling it sports. Go to the Holy Roman Empire in Middle Ages history. Go to, the time of the Reformation with the Inquisition and what they did. Go to modern history. Look at, World War I, World War II, Mussolini, Hitler, what they did in Europe, Stalin, what he did in Russia, Mao in China. There's nothing, it's not new. The world is the world. We need to take the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ, to that world because they are dying in sin that they don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't care, but I can tell you there are some that do. There are some that do care. I'm so grateful. Sunday night was awesome. If you didn't get a chance to see it, if you couldn't make it Sunday night, I encourage you to go back and listen to it. Brother Rodriguez, he's going to Atlantic City. They're doing a tent meeting. They're hoping to start a church out of it this summer. Awesome opportunity to reach a city. I feel like for too long neglected the inner cities in America, just kind of looking at the statistics of where Christianity lies in the United States, where the lack of churches are. It's all in the population centers. It's all in the big cities. For whether because property values are too high, things are so expensive. And listen, I understand the challenges and everything else, but we need to pray for people that God is sending to those places because those are places that have needed the gospel for a long time. And when we live out our faith in troubled times, when we step out by faith, when we test our faith, when we sit there and we decide we're not going to let ourselves be defiled with all the wickedness in the world today, the rewards, the benefits, far outweigh the cost. Far outweigh the cost. And at the end of it all, we can truly be blessed to know that we purposed to not defile ourselves, much like Daniel did to himself. Daniel's purpose. We do need to pray tonight, so before we close, we do need to pray. Anyone have anything they need to add to the prayer sheet? Yes, Ms. Russell? You said grandfather? So pray for Jessica Dillon. It's Jessica Shotwell. Her husband's grandfather passed away, so just be in prayer for that family and that tough time there. Anybody else? Barbara? Yeah. We just need to pray for our country. I don't know if you've seen what's going on in Los Angeles and other places, but it's a in the best way to say it, it's a war being fought for our country. People who want law and order versus some people who don't. And just pray for our leaders that they'll make the decisions that honor and glorify the Lord, and that life will be preserved and protected and valued, because there is a dangerous risk with the amount of that's being done out, especially in Los Angeles, with loss of life and other things there as well. So, anybody else have anything to pray for? Yes.
I just want to really thank the church for praying for me.
So we're glad to see you better. Just a praise I thank you for anyone that was praying for Susan for her health. Yeah. Yes. The prayers aren't unanswered. We may feel like they are at times. I just want to kind of encourage you with that. But, if God says no or wait, or even if he says yes, there's been times in my life where you can feel the prayers of others when people are truly praying for you. It's a blessing to have a church that prays. And, I encourage you, we're here tonight, hopefully I got done early enough. It's about 7:45. Take the next 10, 15, 20 minutes. Just pray. Go before the Lord. There's a lot of things to pray for. Yes, Mrs. Franz? Yeah. Yeah. God's timing is always perfect, and we don't see it, but well, I can tell you that you guys have always been an encouragement to us, and God's not done with you until he, I'm the mindset God's not done with you until he takes you home. So whatever age or station in life you're in, know that God's got a plan for you until the day he says, okay, it's time to come see me. So we're thankful for you guys. We'll be praying for you guys as you get all that sorted out. Anybody else have any praise and prayer requests? Okay, well, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Be in the Lord's house Sunday morning. Don't forget, Sunday school, 9:30, service at 10:30. God bless you all. Have a great evening.